Good morning. The service this week is about wisdom, how you get it, where you get it, what it is. I was looking for quotes to intersperse with my own self-perceived wisdom, and when I Googled the word, the first thing that came up was wisdom teeth. I found that very amusing at the time and began to imagine a worship service based on chewing. I could call it mastication and mystery. There's much humor to be found in my line of work sometimes, along with a variety of challenges, a surfeit of satisfactions, and a surplus of wonderful relationships. I hope you can find the same thing in your life. In the meantime, I'm Annie Foerster, minister to the members of First Jefferson Unitarian Universalist Fellow Church in Fort Worth, Texas. Good morning and welcome to our Sunday service. This week's responses I call second-hand wisdom. But let us begin our worship with music from our pianist, Mikhail Beresnev. Thank you, Misha. The call to worship this morning was written by Ma Teresa Gustillo Gallardo, also known as Tet. There's my temple, believer, unbeliever, or wild one. You are welcome. We have no definition of who we are, but human. We have no code, but that of respect. We have no creed, but that of equality. There's my temple, identity seeker, sinner, stateless, or not. You are welcome. We have no constraints on expression, but space. We have no code, but to listen to poetry between the silence and the surrender. There's my temple, nature tripper, urban dweller, or saint. You are welcome. How shall we divide the world but by our breaths? We have no pope above us, no infallible bull. We have no judgment but in terms of harm. There's my temple, history maker, marginalized, unorganized. You are welcome. We have no covenant among us but mutual assistance. We insist on no assumptions and doubt moral facts. We are free to theorize with emotion and call it hope. There's my temple. Funny, temperamental, shy, or wise, you are welcome. There is not one way of being human, not even Superman. We have no world but that which we create together. There is much wisdom in harmony, as in dissent. A chalice lighting this morning is written by Andrew Pakula, who called it Afraid of the Dark. Oh dear, I put out the helper candle. In sightless night, terror draws us near. Nameless fears of talon and tooth. Hopelessness yawns before us, an abyss. Alone and unknown in the gloom, we are longing for the dawn. O sacred flame, blaze forth. Flame does not want to be today. All right, I've put out the helper candle. My lighter doesn't work. We're going to pretend that the flame is lit, and maybe I'll get some fire while we're doing our hymn. O sacred flame, blaze forth, wisdom brought to life. Guide us with the light of hope, the warmth of love, the beacon of purpose and meaning, because we are all afraid of the dark. Let there be light. Our opening hymn this morning is Morning Has Come, and Reneel Baker is our hymn leader this morning. Reneel.
Morning has come, arise and greet the day. Dance with joy and sing a song with gladness. The light of hope it shines upon each face. May it bring forth on our journey home. A new day dawns, once more the gift is given. Wonder fills this moment shared together. The light of peace here shines upon each face. May it bring faith to guide our journey home. Open our eyes to see that life abounds. Open hearts to welcome it among us. The light of love here shines upon each face. May it bring faith to guide our journey home.
No need to be afraid of the dark anymore. Our chalice is lit. And now, please join me in saying our covenant together. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest of truth is our sacrament, and service is our prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve others in community to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with creation. Thus do we covenant with one another. It's so good to be with you today. How many times have you heard something profound, proclaimed its wisdom, and vowed to use it to improve your own life? I think we can all claim to recognize wisdom when we hear or see it, but can we anticipate it? I mean, can you answer these questions? What is wisdom? Can it be taught and therefore learned? How do we become wise in our own lives? Just when I think I know the answers, they slip beyond my grasp. But think about them, as will I. In the meantime, maybe we can find them behind this door in our story for all ages, titled Beyond Every Door, by Molly Hoosh Gordon. Have Have you read the book, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe? Do you remember how Lucy Pevensey discovers Narnia? Lucy was looking for the perfect place to hide, and she opened the door to a big wardrobe. And she went through the door and into the back of the wardrobe, and suddenly she was in a whole other world, a magical world with witches and fauns and talking beavers. Oh, wouldn't it be wonderful if there were a magical world beyond every door? When Lucy opened the door to Narnia, the door didn't look like anything special. It was just an ordinary door to a wardrobe full of clothes and coats, but across its threshold was magic. Lucy already had a foot in Narnia before she quite realized what was happening. Many of the thresholds in our lives are like this. We don't know that we're crossing into another world until we're already halfway there. The door of a church takes us down a pathway of growth we might have never expected. The door of the doctor's office suddenly opens out into a life with a hard diagnosis. A restaurant door opens into a first date, perhaps, and echoes forward into the relationship of a lifetime. The door to a library or a gym or a dance studio introduces you to a life's passion you might not have otherwise discovered. We cross these thresholds every day of our lives, for good and for ill, in joy, in sorrow, in bittersweet truth. Truly, even our own front door is a great threshold. No matter how familiar the worlds within and without may be, given our lives' reality of constant change, every day we open the same old door again and again, only to step out into a world that is new since the day before. In this way, there is a new world behind every door, awaiting our discovery if we will only encounter it as such. What we find behind these doors depends on us. If you are open to the possibility of talking beavers, they are more likely to appear. And if you believe in magic, its powers will be available to you. If not in your life, then surely in your dreams. And isn't it our dreams, the daydreams especially, that give us the courage and the desire to open a new door in the first place? And remember this, every door has two sides, the inside and the other side. And you get to choose. I keep a notebook on my kitchen table in which I inscribe from time to time words I glean from whatever I'm reading, words that seem to hold special wisdom for me. I call the book Wisdom Scraps. The current one was begun on July 13th, 2017, and there is another that precedes it. That one was begun in January of 2012, shortly after I first moved to Fort Worth. I refer to these scraps when I'm in need of inspiration or support, or when I'm looking for a topic for Sunday services. And recently, I purchased a book by a writer I'm assuming kept a wisdom scrapbook of his own. He has divided his book into daily scraps, which he then expands with words of his own. His name is Mark Nepo, and he calls this book the Book of Awakening, having the life you want by being present to the life you have. Well, I keep this book on the corner of the dresser near the door of my bedroom. And every morning before I leave the bedroom for the magic of life awake, I read the wisdom he offers for that particular date, his personal explanation, and his suggestions for incorporating a particular practice into your own life. And then I open the door from the bedroom and step out into the day, feeling just a bit wiser, armed with a tool or a weapon to meet the occasions that are going to arise. Nepo even has a subject index in his book indicating he's either very wise or very organized, maybe a little of both. Like you, I think I accept wisdom when I see it. Yet not every entry meets my criteria. I believe it was written for someone else on that particular day. Could wisdom be that elusive, that individualistic? Let us consult the experts, the knowledgeable if not the wise, the lexicographers, those who compiled dictionaries. Here's the one I looked up online. Wisdom, a noun, the quality of having experience, knowledge, and good judgment. Ah, a tripart recipe, a test for sagacity. And there follows a list of words with similar meanings, words like intelligence, understanding, insight, perception, percipience, perspicuity. Oh, the list goes on and ends with common sense, which I don't include in my personal lexicon of wisdom, but perhaps that's a matter of taste. Let's look at definition 2 and 3 before we begin judging, though. 2, the soundness of an action or decision with regard to the application of experience, knowledge, and good judgment. Again, with the trinity of discernment. And 3, the body of knowledge and principles that develops within a specified society or period. I might have to come back to that one. And then another long list of words with similar meanings follow. And consistently throughout this particular dictionary, the words with opposite meanings are stupidity and folly. Similar and opposite. Are we no longer calling them synonyms and antonyms? Question for another day. All right, we have a starting place. Experience, knowledge, and good judgment. It seems right, doesn't it? Experience especially. I think that's why we often assign wisdom to the elders in our society. I know I didn't feel especially wise in my childhood or youth, not even my young adulthood. I was more confused then than at those earlier times because I thought I would automatically come to know what to do with and about my life simply by having arrived at that mystical place where I could be called an adult. No, I remember coming across an early entry in my journal just after my daughter was born, and I was barely 20. And it read, "I don't know what to do. I'm new to being an adult. I thought it would be easier." I have to laugh at that now. I'm much more sure of myself now, 6 decades later. It had to be experience that did it. Surely was one of those synonyms. Surety was one of those synonyms. But here's the insight into that. Wisdom, I've found, doesn't come from successes, although they might contribute. Wisdom is best learned from the mistakes we make. And it is enforced when we discover we have made the same mistake again, until we learn not to do it, or to at least fail more elegantly with grace and aplomb. That's a good thing, a helpful thing. Think about it. We have a built-in excuse for our foolishness and folly. We are learning to become wise. So judge not. We are all in the same school. The only true stupidity is not learning from our mistakes. The second ingredient in our recipe is knowledge. Knowing things is important. Knowing how to do things, understanding how the world works are imperatives to survival. But we can be mistaught and never learn wisdom, but only if we go through life clutching that knowledge to our chests in the fear that learning something new means we have to let go of what we've already learned. There are many, many places to learn knowledge. From our families, from going to school, from reading books, from listening, from seeking, even from opening those doors we talked about earlier. But here's something I've noticed. Like the unmixability of water and oil, too much learning sometimes makes experience more difficult to add to the recipe, to blend it in with what's going on. And we often speak of the wisdom of innocence, those surprise insights of children. Some people are intuitively wise about certain things. My mother was one of those people who cooked, who baked without the use of measuring cups and spoons. She relied on her experience to know what consistency dough should be to stop adding liquid to the dry ingredients. Perhaps learning wisdom is like that, constantly testing the mix, questioning where you are in your quest. That becomes even more clear when you examine the third ingredient, good judgment. How do you learn good judgment? Why? From experience and knowledge. And yet, it is admittedly different from wisdom. Or is it? Oh, all this thinking makes my head hurt. I need a break. How about you? Why don't I pause with one of those pieces of secondhand wisdom, one that I Googled from that great writer Anonymous. It said, to live your life, attract what you expect, reflect what you desire, become what you respect, and mirror what you admire. That sounds wise. Let's give it a try. I'd like to give you a generosity report this morning, because this afternoon we are going to be at our spring congregational meeting where Dan Sexton, this year's stewardship chair, will give us the full report on our stewardship campaign, and we will vote on next year's budget. I want to thank all of you who pledged your time, your talents, and your treasures for the coming year. And good wishes to all the groups who rent our building and grounds and bring us additional income. Let us remember all that flows in toward us and resolve to reach out and give back to the community, the neighborhood, and the world. And please come to the congregational meeting. We need your opinions and your votes. I have a reading for you that kind of goes along with this idea of secondhand wisdom. It's titled Cherish Your Doubts and was written by Michael Schuler. He said, cherish your doubts, for doubt is the servant of truth. Question your convictions, for beliefs too tightly held strangle the mind and its natural wisdom. Suspect all certitudes, for the world whirls on, nothing abides. Yet in our inner rooms full of doubt, inquiry, and suspicion, let a corner be reserved for trust. For without trust, there is no space for communities to gather or for friendships to be forged. Indeed, this is the small corner where we connect and reconnect with each other. Let's think about that as we sing another hymn. This is a request from Mary Kerwin, who tells me we haven't sung it recently or often enough for her. Besides, it's a song about spring, and it is springtime, and it's also, to my thinking, a song about seeking wisdom. Renelle?
That's of I'm full these days of the old into new. Our dreaming shows us the way. Wondrous our faith settles deep in the earth. Rising green to bring a new day. Rising green, rising green, rising green to bring a new day.
That was beautiful, and thank you, Mary, for suggesting it. I want to give space to some of that secondhand wisdom I've been talking about. I want to read from my wisdom scraps, from the pages I've dog-eared in the Book of Awakening, and from some Unitarian Universalist poets and prosodists, beginning with Gordon B. McKeeman, who wrote this bit of wisdom he called Knowing Who You Are. Wisdom, fundamentally, is knowing who you are, where you are, and what you're trying to do or be. One of the best parts of being the preacher is getting to choose the wisdom scraps you want to share, but I encourage you to seek and share your own. That's what community is about. I think our church administrator has that same job satisfaction when he chooses a quote to include in the weekly emails he sends out to let you know what's going on at the church. There's always room for more wisdom, so share yours and we'll print it. Send them to minister or administrator at firstjefferson.org, and we'll take care of that. My first choice is an entry for April 23rd titled Playing Small from Sharon Priest. She said, "There will never be an us if I play small." Now, Nepo interprets it this way. Hard as it is, we cannot shrink from our relationships, or we simply become an audience or gopher for the dominant partner or friend. He admits that when he voices his own concerns and needs, while not always easy, he is more able to be himself more fully and contribute equally in the relationship. He quotes Martin Buber, who wrote, "Before there can be a true relationship, there must be two separate beings who can relate. Unless we work to be ourselves, we can never truly know others or the numinous world we live in." Now that's especially true when we speak of community and the many relationships we have here at church. Disagreeing isn't folly, but not sharing your point of view and resenting it later certainly is. Here's the first entry in my recent book of wisdom scraps, this one from Parker Palmer in his book, A Hidden Wholeness. He wrote, "Philosophers haggle about what to call this core of our humanity. Thomas Merton called it the true self. Buddhists call it original nature or the big self. Quakers call it the inner teacher or the inner light. Hasidic Jews call it a spark of the divine. Humanists call it identity and integrity. And in popular parlance, people often call it the soul." I find Parker Palmer one of the wisest philosophers I know or have read about. He has this ability to gather opinions and insights from all around him and make us see them as jewels in a crown, none more brilliant than the others, but making a bolder statement, a deeper understanding than any of them make alone. That is a skill I strive for, who I want to be when I grow up. I often find wisdom in novelists I choose to read. Here are two quite different offerings from Elizabeth Berg's recent novel, The Dream Lover. First, she said, "Courage and resolve, these are ways to make changes in one's life." And she's talking about being stuck, unable to relate to someone because of the doors we have shut against ourselves to protect us from having to look at life in new ways, from having to face the possibility of change. This observation comes on page 6 of the book, but 13 pages later, her heroine is still struggling to find courage and resolve, and Berg notes this obvious truth. Those who say life is a blessing are right, and those who say it is endlessly cruel are also right. No one philosopher, theologian, poet, or novelist ever said it was easy to live, much less to become wise. There are only 100 entries in this recent collection of mine. That isn't much for having been gathering them for nearly 4 years. I could conclude that wisdom isn't easy to find, or I could admit that I often miss it. That's one of the reasons I write it down. I don't want to forget the hard-won entries. Here's an observation I gathered for my own birthday, which was yesterday, an observation made by Joanne Jenkins, CEO of AARP, in her book, Disrupt Aging. Listen to the language we all recognize that identifies our inbred anxiety about aging in a world we've been told belongs to the young. You turn 30. You push 40. You reach 50. You hit 60. You make it to 70. And after that, it's just day by day. But don't despair. We've already established that wisdom is rare at low altitudes, and I can attest that day by day is not a bad way to live once you accept the blessing, endlessly cruel dichotomy of it all. I'm going to end this section of the service with a pair of wisdom scraps from my first collection, when I first decided to put them all in a single book instead of jotting them down on separate scraps of paper that often got lost or thrown out. That in itself was a piece of wisdom. Both of these are from a book by Jess Walters titled The Beautiful Ruins. I've already forgotten the plot of the book, but these two standouts are enough for me to remember. He wrote, "Life is a blatant act of imagination." Don't you just love it? I do. All that religion and philosophy that tells us exactly how we are supposed to act, who we are supposed to become, and Walters just lays what we are doing out there and calls it what it is, a blatant act of imagination. He goes on later in the book to explain what he means. He says, all we have is the story we tell. Everything we do, every decision we make, our strength, our weakness, our motivation, our history and character, what we believe, none of it is real. It's all just part of the story we tell. But here's the thing. It's our goddamn story. That's it. We don't really live our lives and tell it unless we tell our stories to ourselves, to our families and friends, to anyone who will listen, to even one goddamn chapter. That's what relationships, what community are all about. Each of us telling our story and being heard. Every Sunday at this time, we have a communion of names and milestones to talk about the stories that live in our own community. I am happy to tell this story. We have our first new member since the lockdown in 2020. We have had interest in our recorded services, and people have asked for literature or answers to specific questions. But this week, we had someone say she wants to join us, not wait until September when we open our services to the public again. She will sign the membership book next Wednesday, and I will introduce you to her more fully after that. To others who are interested in joining us, the book is available. And here's a story I would like to share with you that has nothing to do with those in our community, but could have. I am reading a most amazing book now called Breath by James Nestor. It's all about how we breathe, the evolution of our breathing, and how much difference breathing properly makes in our own lives. It doesn't sound all that interesting, but he's a marvelous writer, and he tells his own story and the story of breath, and it is absolutely fascinating, and I think would make all of us healthier if we read it. That's my wisdom for you today. Let us take a moment to consider the stories that live in this community, the ones that are told aloud, the ones that are spoken in whispers, the ones that live here unspoken but just as important. Let us share in the silence as we meditate on our community and one another's stories. This is my final response on the subject of wisdom. Those of you who know me well know that I love words. I love exploring them, finding out what more they can say. I once made an observation, wrote it in my wisdom scrapbook, about the author Mary Rose O'Reilly, saying that reading her is a sensuous experience. She strokes words, I wrote, until they mean things even they didn't know they had in them. I put that in the wisdom scrapbooks after I read her book, The Barn at the End of the World, a delicious book. But that's why I often start my search for meaning in the dictionary. Words don't always carry the same meaning throughout their lives. They too learn wisdom from their experiences. I mean, did you know that the word silly once meant only empty? It wasn't until someone described a person with an empty head that it took on the meaning we all know today. And farm once meant a small town, until small towns grew to include several of what we call farms today. Words change. So I've been thinking of wisdom and my own definition of words related to it. You can be your own lexicographer, you know. You can redefine words to suit the meanings they have held in your own history, but you have to tell other people about them. So I started with that dictionary definition I found, not in a book, but online. I don't even know if I own a dictionary anymore. If it is still on my bookshelf somewhere, I haven't consulted it in years. I started from experience, knowledge, and good judgment, and then I extrapolated for this service. Here are words I associate with wisdom. Learning. I've already acknowledged that the more facts and truth we have, the more we can discover more factual things and greater truths, which I believe is the pathway to wisdom. And how about thinking? I realize I use the phrase "I think" a lot when I speak to you on Sunday mornings, probably on other days of the week as well. That's the way I show that I have an open mind, even about the ideas I myself expound. It's meant to be the way I say, this is what I currently believe to be true, or this is what I'm considering at the moment, I think. Believing, then, is the next word I associate with wisdom. Believing is a firmer declaration of a truth or a faith or an understanding or the story we tell about ourselves. It connotes strength and steadfastness, constancy. Yet, as I use it, it implies a willingness to be proven wrong. Open-mindedness precedes wisdom in my personal dictionary. Reasoning. Now that's a big favorite among Unitarian Universalists. We like it for explaining how and why we changed our minds. It doesn't stand up to reasoning, we say, when we expound the scientific view of life and how it came to be. It is a sort of unwritten eighth principle that is often pronounced rational, as in any rational human being will agree, and precedes your current argument. Yes, those are the words of our catechism, if you accept catechism as a rational word. But having said that, I must warn you that at a moment's notice, and sometimes with no notice at all, rational morphs into rationalizing. And that's a pretty way of describing what we do when someone doesn't agree with our reasoning. Or it's a way we explain to ourselves the lies we tell ourselves when we are alone. The way we prove we are right when doubts intrude. Thoreau remarked that anyone who is more right than his neighbor is a majority of one. And when we suspect we have become a majority of one, we rationalize. And I can say that with great conviction because what has occurred to me as I explored the highways and alleys of wisdom is that the wisdom scraps I collect are not universal or conclusive. I collect them because when I find them, they agree with what I already believe. Oh my, that might be the wisest thing I've said all morning. Let's go back to the idea of telling our own story. Now let's sing about the river of words, of love, of wisdom, and of faith that flows in our souls and in our hearts and in our minds, and is the wisdom we share with one another. Let's sing "There's a river flowing in my soul."
There's a river flowing in my soul. There's a river flowing in my soul. And it's telling me that I'm somebody. There's a river flowing in my soul. There's a river flowing in my heart. heart, and it's telling me that I'm somebody. There's a river flowing in my heart. There's a river flowing in my mind. There's a river flowing in my mind, and it's telling me that I'm somebody. There's a river flowing in my mind. There's a river flowing in my soul. There's a river flowing in my soul.
It's telling me that I'm somebody, and so are you. There's a river of belief flowing in our souls. We lit our chalice this morning because we are all afraid of the dark at one time or another. So take its light into your soul. Make it a part of your story. And we can extinguish it here because it lives in each of us. And now go forth in simplicity. Find and walk the path that leads to compassion and wisdom, that leads to happiness, peace, and ease. Welcome the stranger and open your heart to a world in need of healing. Be courageous before the forces of hate. Hold and embody a vision of the common good that serves the needs of all people. So may it be in all our lives.